What can you tell us about the scope of this inquiry? What would you like to see it cover?
Well, it'll be quite broad. I think there's a number of issues. So the first is just understanding exactly what contaminated the water supply. I think the second thing is to look and see whether everybody reacted in the way that you would expect them, and that includes the government. So the Ministry of Health, they have some responsibilities and have been actively working on the ground with the people there, making sure that they've got the resources and the likes. And then I guess it's sort of future learning. So there's quite it'll probably be a two-part inquiry, and there's quite a broad part to it.
At what level will this be? What are you calling this?
So it'll be under the Inquiries Act, I think. And look, there are a couple of options there, but we may well get it to report to the Governor-General, actually, is the way it'll work.
And will you be announcing today who's going to conduct it?
No, what we'll announce today is the broad terms of reference and the nature of the inquiry that'll take place. So it's independent, though, away from the other inquiry that the local government.
Sure. Let's go through the strands of that you've outlined there. In terms of the response, are you satisfied with what you've seen? Obviously, you're going to unpack all the detail in the inquiry, but in terms of the response, do you think it's been adequate?
In terms of what I've seen, but I think you've got to appreciate I'm not on the ground. I haven't seen absolutely everything, and I know that doesn't take away from the fact that people have got very unwell, and there's a deep level of frustration. But at the very high level, my understanding was they went out there and tested the water on the Tuesday. It was clear. They tested again on the Thursday, got the results on the Friday. As soon as they got some results, which could have been a false positive, they did act in chlorinate, and obviously that set off and trained the public messaging. And then by the Saturday, they got the formal result back. That's how I understand the first round of things worked.
What about the government's response? The refusal, there's been some highlight on this, to declare a drinking water emergency. Isn't it a drinking water emergency when 4,000 people get sick?
Yeah, okay, so we'll have to just go and have a look at all the individual parts of that and what's...
This must have been a ministerial discussion because Jonathan Coleman could have called a drinking water emergency. Why did he not? Well,
that I don't know. I mean, he was away, so it was deputised to Sam Lotoinga. But we'll have to go and have a look at exactly what that is.
Were you involved in those discussions?
No, I wasn't involved in that.
Really?
No. I mean, all of that will have happened over the weekend, that first weekend. By the Monday, or effectively the Tuesday morning, we had the Director General of Health and others coming to see me. So, look, there'll be... Do
you reckon it constitutes an emergency, though, if 4,000 people get sick?
Yeah, well, my only point would be it's not a question of whether it isn't a serious issue. It's just a question of whether it triggers exactly what they, what is the best response, and sometimes it can be a bit different. It's like why sometimes they have a civil emergency and sometimes they don't. But that's all the sorts of things that the inquiry needs to go and look at. Did they get enough support? Did they give the early warning advice? Did they act quickly enough? Were people uniformly informed?
Does the government have a role in potential in compensation? Sorry, in compensation for past businesses?
It doesn't look like it, but we're obviously trying to help people as best we can, and that's what we're really doing around IRD and saying, look, what we do sometimes with we've done it with other businesses and we've done it with farmers, where we say, look, around your provisional tax, we'll make life easier for you so that you don't have to pay it exactly at the same time.
Okay. There's been a lot of focus too on whether this is as a result of intensification in agriculture. Do you think that this inquiry should look at that issue more broadly? Because we've had a lot of scientists saying that the rates of Campylobacter, waterborne Campylobacter in New Zealand are pretty high by international standards. I've looked at that this morning. Those figures do tend to back up the fact that we're higher than the UK, Australia, some of those other countries we compare ourselves with. So would this inquiry look more broadly at New Zealand's water supply, or are you just going to focus this locally?
There's a couple of aspects of the inquiry. There is a broader sort of look at the overall structure from what I can see. But all of that's yet to be determined by Cabinet today. But I guess what I'd sort of say is it's like all of these things, that's the purpose of having an inquiry, is to absolutely understand what's gone wrong. So is it an issue that, that some people might want to say, which is there's too much agriculture or too much intensification, or is it that intensification and that increase is absolutely fine, but something went terribly wrong here, and what that something is needs to be identified. And that's been the slightly tricky thing with this. I don't think they've actually come out and say
we don't know exactly what it is. But are you going to look at that issue then? I just want to clarify whether you're going to look at whether intensification in agriculture, and it hasn't been dairy in this case. It's not.
Well, it could. Yeah, that's right. There's lots of potential options of what it could be.
So will it look at that issue?
Well, it's looking at the broader. There's an element of who did what, when, and how, and there's a broader element to it. Maybe not as broad as all of agriculture in New Zealand, but there's two parts to the inquiry.
Okay. Do you have a concern yourself from the expert advice that you get that perhaps this is a factor?
Look, I mean, I haven't seen anything there. I mean, there's certainly been a factor around waterways in New Zealand, and the government's been actively working to try and resolve those issues, which has been both a clean-up campaign, a preventative campaign around fencing and the likes for dairying, for instance, and we are, and the setting of a national water standard has been all about trying to if we have an understanding of what the standard is, then we can have an understanding of what we need to do to get to the level we want.
Do you think heads could roll as a result of this inquiry?
The only issue here, and I just want to be extremely careful about these things, but when people say these things can be toothless, they're not necessarily toothless. I mean, it's certainly someone's died. Now, whether they've died as a result of Campylobacter, a very, very different issue, but someone's potentially died. So you cannot 100% rule out civil or criminal charges.
Oh, really?
So these things can be quite serious, but I'm not saying it would do or that's the cause. I'm just saying we have to look at everything.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prime Minister John Key.